Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and the founder of this podcast and the Order of Man movement. I want to welcome you back. We're going to do an Ask Me Anything today. This one's obviously a little different because if you've been listening for any amount of time, you know that typically I have my co-host, Kip Sorensen, join us, but he is unavailable today, so you're getting me solo. Got a lot of good questions. Fortunately, Kip's well prepared, and he sent me these questions ahead of time, and I'm going to try to get through as many as I can. There's a lot of questions here, but my goal is to give you as many valid answers as I can. I will let you be the judge of whether or not these things are valid. Before we get into this, I do just want to mention a couple of things. Number one, we've got our free course called Battle Ready. Actually, it's called 30 Days to Battle Ready. 30 Days to Battle Ready. When you sign up, you're going to get a series of emails over a 30-day period that are going to give you information into the 4 phases that you need to incorporate into your planning process so that you can accomplish more in your business, in your personal life, your fitness, your finances, whatever endeavors that you are on currently. I want to help you maximize the time it takes to get there. Actually, I should say minimize the time it takes to get there, and maximize your results. So if you're interested in that, again, it's a free 30-day email course. You can check it out at orderofman.com/battleready. I apologize. Been a little congested over the past couple of weeks, so just working through that. It's not COVID, all right? You don't have to worry about that with me right now. Just a little congestion, that's all it is. Anyways, these questions today come from the Facebook group, which if you are interested, you can check out at Order of Man at facebook.com/groups/Order of Man. I've got so many links at this point. Sometimes it's a little tricky to keep them all straight. But you can check out the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Order of Man. All right, guys, let's get into it. So the first question is from Kylan Flynn. He says, beginner's guide, ? So you started getting things in order, next few steps, ... This is actually a pretty common question. Where do I start? Essentially, that's what this question is asking. You know, you guys are trying to improve. You're trying to get back on track. Maybe you've deviated for a little bit or for years or longer potentially. And so now you're trying to get back on track. Maybe you never were on track. So where do you start? That's the question. Here's the answer. It does not matter. It doesn't matter. I personally, if it's been a long time or you've never been on track, I would start with the lowest hanging fruit. I'd tell guys, go to the gym. If you're not going to the gym, if you're not getting strong, if you're not getting lean, if you're not training martial arts, if you're not doing some of these things, then I think you're missing a powerful opportunity. The reason I think that's the lowest hanging fruit is because it's easy to go to the gym. It's easy to get your training in. You can see results almost overnight. I mean, if you went and you trained for the next, let's say for the rest of this week, and you ate clean and you slept well and you did everything you needed to do, you could start experiencing results this week. It would be that quick. And that's why I think it's important if you're trying to get back on track after being off track for a very long time, you want to build up those wins as quickly as possible. So going to the gym is going to help you build up those wins as quickly as possible. But if it's not at the gym, just start planning out your day. Very simply, just get out a planner. If you're watching this on YouTube, you saw me lean over because I had to grab mine, but mine is always right here within arm's reach. I've got my daily planner out. This is our battle planner that you can check out in the store if you're interested. By the way, we have a new kids battle planner available, which you should certainly check out as well. That's in the store, store.orderman.com. But guys, I plan out every single day. If you're not planning out your day, what the hell are you doing with your day? Maybe it goes well, maybe it doesn't go so well, but how do you know? How do you quantify it? How do you track it? How do you measure it? In fact, the very first page of this battle planner is a quote from Carl Pearson. It says, "That which is measured improves." So if you want to improve in some facet of your life, then you've got to get out a piece of paper or a computer program or an app, whatever it looks like, and you've got to start documenting. If you're not documenting, you don't know if what you're doing is working or not working or moving you closer to your goals. You don't even know what your goals are. I mean, they might be up here bouncing around in your brain, but if you haven't documented them in an app or a program or a computer software or on a piece of paper, all you really have is dreams. We're not about dreams here. We're about turning those dreams into reality. So the first step is to document what those are. And having a plan every single morning will help institute that, will help make those dreams a reality. So start in the gym, start your daily planning, or start wherever the lowest hanging fruit is. That's it. Because guys, we don't make decisions in a vacuum. So if you improve in one facet of your life, you're naturally and inevitably going to improve in other facets of your life. If you dial in your fitness, you're going to be a better worker. If you dial in your systems at work, you're going to have a better love life. If you dial in your intimacy and your love life with your wife, work's going to be more efficient. It's all interdependent. There's no decisions in vacuums. So wherever you decide to improve, the better off you're going to be. I would start in the gym and I would say, and plan your day. All right, number 2, Nathan Gabbard. What is the most impactful quote you ever heard, and what quote would you like to be remembered by? Well, the most impactful quote, I like quotes, and there's a lot of quotes that come to mind, but the one that sticks out for me right now, and I've said this to you guys before, is a quote by John Eldredge. If you don't know who he is, you definitely need to check him out. He's been on the podcast. He is the author of a book called Wild at Heart, which frankly changed my life. And anytime I put a book list out there for men to read, Wild at Heart is always included in that list. It transformed the way I think about masculinity and my role in society as a husband and a father and just a man in general. And the quote is this: deep in his heart, every man longs for a battle to fight, an adventure to live, and a beauty to rescue. And I don't think enough men are getting any of those. A battle to fight, an adventure to live, and a beauty to rescue. A battle to fight, I mean, our lives are so docile and easy. Like, what is it that we have to fight about? Now, I know there's a lot of civil unrest, and that's because there isn't anything worthy to fight about, so we make up dumb shit to fret over that doesn't really exist. But what if you engaged in a real battle? For example, within Order of Man, my battle is to reclaim and restore masculinity. That's a battle I'm deeply committed to. It's a hill I'm willing to die on, and I'm engaged and have enthusiasm because of it. An adventure to live. When's the last time you went on an adventure? When is the last time you took any level of risk to your personal safety or your personal well-being? I'm not saying go out there and be reckless, but man, generally men are to go out and experience life and take risks and go on adventures and push the bounds of what we previously thought possible. That might be within your business. It might be physically, some sort of physical challenge like running a marathon or doing a triathlon like my friend Tanner Guzzi just completed. Whatever that looks like. What is your adventure? What adventure are you living? And a beauty to rescue. You know, what is the woman you're attracted to? Is she lovely? Is she a beauty? I'm not talking about just physical beauty, although that's also important. I've heard people say that, you know, beauty, outer beauty doesn't matter. Well, that's BS. We all know that matters. I'm not saying it's the only factor, but it's certainly a consideration. Like, you want to be physically attracted to the woman that you're with, but is she lovely? Is she beautiful? Are you fostering that in her? And I'm not saying rescue, a beauty to rescue, and I don't think John Eldredge is saying this, a beauty to rescue like some sort of damsel in distress. That's not what I'm referring to. But are you partnered with a woman? Are you banded with her? Are you on the same mission? Are you working towards a common objective? Are you helping her with your masculinity in a way that she can't bring to the table on her own? And vice versa, by the way. All right, there's a lot of feminine characteristics that my wife possesses that I would not bring to the equation on my own. And that's the beauty of this symbiotic relationship. She needs me because of what I bring to the table. I need her because of what she brings to the table. And we're better off because of it. Right? We're all better off because of it. So deep in his heart, every man longs for a battle to fight, an adventure to live, and a beauty to rescue. What is the quote I would like to be remembered by? I don't know. I haven't thought of if there's a quote out there. Generally, I would just like people to think, when they think of me, to think, you know, Ryan tried everything that he wanted to. That's it. If I had a thought in my mind, no matter how crazy, no matter how wild, that I was actually willing to go out there to try it, to see if it would work, and to put it into practice, to put it into play, to put it on the table and see what came of it. I'm not suggesting it's always going to work out. In fact, I don't need to be known for everything worked in his favor. but I would like to be known for a gentleman and a man who tried everything that he wanted to. And he was willing to take the risk. He's willing to go on the adventures, just like that quote from John Eldridge. All right. Dallin Edwards. Excuse me. Sorry about the congestion, guys. Again, we got to work through it. I got to work through it. You might have to work through it too in listening to me. Dallin says, how do you know when it's time to quit something versus sticking to it? Look, the very easy answer on this is when it's no longer interesting to you. That's it. Now, notice I didn't say when it's no longer hard or it's fun. None of that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if it's not interesting to you, if it no longer resonates with you, then at that point, it might be time to reconsider something else. I'll give you an example. In my financial planning practice, which I was in the financial planning field for roughly 10 years, a little less than 10 years. And I got to the point where it was just no longer interesting. My clients would call me and they would ask to, change their portfolio or to contribute more money to their investments or whatever it is they were after. And I would see the number pop up on my phone and I would just dread it. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. And it wasn't because I didn't appreciate those people. It wasn't because I didn't like them. Of course I did. I had relationships with all my clients. It was just, I was no longer interested. So Dallin used this as a verbiage, quit something. That's a hard word to use, although it's true. I think it's accurate. So I quit, right? I pivoted. I changed. So I stopped doing that. So I think it's an accurate word, but I don't think it paints the picture exactly correct. Because we look at quit as failure. Like I quit because it was too hard. I quit because I couldn't hack it. Well, that's not the case. It wasn't too hard, and I certainly could hack it. I had a very successful financial planning practice, and it continued to grow exponentially year in and year out. So it wasn't that I couldn't hack it. It was that it was no longer interesting to me. So when do you consider quitting versus sticking to it? If it's still interesting to you, you need to stick with it. If it still engages your mind, your body, your soul, your being, then you need to stick with it. And if it's hard, that's okay. That's not a factor. What's a factor? It's a consideration. You got to figure out ways to get past it, but it's not certainly a reason to quit. But if you're no longer interested, then you got to drive on. Dallin also says, for example, like moving on from an idea or maybe changing up a training routine or abandoning a pursuit. Yeah, same thing. If you're no longer interested in it, then drive on. Or you talk about training routine, for example. If it's not producing the results that you're after, and you got to give it time, right? Things take time. But if you've tried a training routine for 90 days and you're not experiencing the results or you don't like it or you're deflated because you don't enjoy the training regimen, yeah, you probably ought to consider changing things around. All right, Jaden Black. He says, what are some effective methods you have used to teach your sons to protect their sisters? My boy, 5 years old, hits his sister on a daily basis. I think 5 years old is pretty young. I'm not saying you can't teach some of these things, but yeah, I don't think having a 5-year-old boy who's hitting his sister on a daily basis, it sounds like you just have those two. I don't think that's abnormal. I really don't think you have anything to worry about here. My 4-year-old hits his siblings, his 12-year-old, his 9-year-old, his 6-year-old sibling all the time. And although we don't condone him hitting, and we talk with him about that, and there's discipline in place, it isn't abnormal behavior. So we need to understand that first. You've got a 5-year-old son. He's aggressive. He likes to wrestle. He likes to fight. He likes to be physical. I don't think that's weird. In fact, I think that should be encouraged. Not him hitting his sister, but him using his physicality and his aggression in a positive way. Because what most of society will do and say is, well, he's got ADHD and he's got some aggression issues and we got to medicate him. Well, hold up. Let's see if we can burn it out of him first, because I think that's what boys need. So I would consider getting him involved in some sort of martial arts, whether that's karate. My mom got me involved in karate when I was young. I want to say I was not that young, I guess. I was maybe 10, 11, 12 years old, somewhere in there. Got me involved in Kempo karate, got me involved in competitive sports, football namely, and then I went into wrestling and baseball. And these were all very good outlets for me to be able to exercise some physicality and aggression, which I did have, by the way, a lot of aggression. When I wasn't playing sports, man, it was really, really hard for me. And I was very aggressive, verbally, physically, aggressive. I got into fights and got into trouble when I wasn't playing competitive sports. So you might have a son who's driven by that physicality. There's nothing wrong with that. You just need to tap into that. And then teach him to harness it. Teach him to use it for constructive outcomes. Now, at 5 years old, it's going to be difficult to have some of these conversations. But I would talk with him about using that skill set, using the mindset, using that personality. And all of them can be used for productive outcomes, but using them in a positive and constructive way as opposed to a destructive way. So if he needs to hit something, cool, buy him a punching bag. If he wants to roughhouse and wrestle, rather than taking it out on other people, namely a sister, have him do that with you so that you can play and you can bond and you can have some physicality. I've actually been thinking a lot about that. I think there's something to be said for men being physical with each other. And I know that sounds really weird. I know when you hear that, you're like, that sounds strange. Like, I don't know about that. I'm not saying sexual, obviously. Some people would probably read it that way because they're always looking for something to be wrong. But I think there's something to be said for men being physical with each other, touching each other in a physical and resisting, strong, pitting yourself against another individual way. I think there's something to be said for that, for men. And yet we don't get enough of it. We don't get any of it, really. Unless you're in competitive sports, you're in martial arts, you're in some of these practices. But outside of that, you're just not going to get it. So I think bonding physically with your son by buying some mats, I don't know, maybe spend $100 on some mats from Amazon, have them delivered to you, set them in a corner of your house. The mats that we have, I want to say they're probably 8 by 8 square foot mat. And they fold up, they collapse. So when we're not using them, we fold them, throw them under the table, and then when we want to pull them out, which is just about every day, we unfold them and we roughhouse and we wrestle. I don't instruct them too much as we play games because I want to make it fun, but that might be a way to alleviate some of the physicality. But you're never going to get rid of it. In fact, you shouldn't want to get rid of it. If you want to get rid of it, just pop them full of drugs and, you can sedate them. But Jaden, I'm sure that's not what you want to do. No sane human being, father especially, would want to do that. So burn it out of them. Let them use it in a productive way. All right, Wilson Land. Excuse me. He says, have you climbed Mount Katahdin yet? No, I haven't. I actually haven't done a lot of hikes around here in Maine. I've been here for a year. Look, I'm not using it as an excuse. I'm just saying I've been busy with other things, but a lot of these hikes are something that I'm very, very interested in. But that isn't something we participated yet in. Chris Moore, how are you prepared in the event of a real pandemic? Do you have a survival cache? Yes, we do. Food storage is very important for us. Provisions are very important for us. My wife and I and family have used food storage even outside of any sort of pandemic or real natural disaster emergency. I mean, we've been in financial hardship in the past. We've been married for 16 years this year. And especially early in our marriage, we really, really struggled financially. And I'll tell you, it's the beans and the rice and the green beans and the things that she canned that really went a long way to ensuring that her and I and my 1-year-old son at the time actually had food in our bellies. So having food storage is beneficial even outside of some sort of natural disaster or, in this case, like Chris says, a real pandemic. You might just find yourself in a bad financial situation and you don't have money to pay for groceries, which we were at the time. And so we tapped into our food storage. And my goal has always been to have 1 year of food storage for myself and my family. We have ammunition, we have guns, we have all the provisions in place. Like, this stuff is very real to me. And I think it's a crucial part of being a man. We talk about the core tenets of masculinity, which is to protect, provide, and preside. And that protect and provide component is crucial. And we need to think about situations and events that might come up that we aren't totally inadequately prepared for, so we can get ready now. So if and when those situations come up, we'll find ourselves in a good position. So food storage, ammunition, supplies, things in my truck, things in the house, blankets, even just having backup systems and procedures in place. The power went out here towards the end of winter last year. I guess it was early this year. And we had our generator, fortunately, with some propane, running to the generator, and it was hooked up to our panel. We had that installed. One of the first things we did when we moved here. And for 3 days, the power was completely out. Well, without the power, we would have froze to death. So having that in place was crucial, and it was expensive, and I didn't want to pay for it, but having that in place was crucial because of the situation we found ourselves in. So part of our job as men is to anticipate what might come up and then to make ourselves capable of dealing with it. Sean Smith, how did you grow your podcast? Any tips for those who are podcasting themselves? Sean, the biggest thing is to be consistent and then to continue to level up the caliber of guests that you're getting on the podcast and then to make it easy for them to share. That's it. Outside of that, I would say maybe things like know exactly what your mission is and what you stand for. Be willing to be controversial and then just getting good at articulating and sharing a message and then sharing it over and over and over again. Sometimes I think when I share on social media, sometimes I think, this is the same thing you guys have heard for the last 5.5 years, but it's important because new guys have joined in, new guys are listening, guys that have been around forever are seeing the consistency of your messaging and your branding and what you're talking about, and it resonates with those individuals. So I get a lot of compliments about the consistency in our messaging. Well, that's not just randomly, that's how it worked out. It's very, very deliberate and very intentional. Outside of that, just get your head in the game, and get after it. Try to secure great guests. Make it very, very easy for them to share, and then be willing to stand your ground and just do what I do. Watch what I do. This is the suggestion I give when people say, how can I be successful in fill in the blank? Find those people who are successful in fill in the blank and then pay them money to coach you to be successful in fill in the blank. It's very easy. It's a very simple process. It's not complicated. It's not complex. We like to complicate it. Oh, it couldn't possibly be that easy. Well, that gives us an out. If it's not easy, it gives us an out. It is easy. It is easy. Guys will say, well, it's simple, not easy. No, it's simple and it's easy. If you were committed and you were dedicated to it, and you did what other people told you to do who were successful, and you followed and mimicked what they did, then it would be simple and easy for you. So don't overlook it. Don't overcomplicate it. It doesn't need to be that way. Bob Ross says, what are your options on the legalization of CBD and THC? How do you view this both nationally and locally? Look, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but it seems to me that if you can drink alcohol, you can smoke cigarettes, you can gamble, you can do all these things that we know are not necessarily good for you, that we can trust individuals to make smart and good decisions with regards to their use of cannabis and marijuana, CBD and THC. I don't know how it impacts the mind and the body and the physiology relative to alcohol, because this isn't something I study, but it seems to me that it's not any worse than those things. Now, I think there are drugs that should be banned just because of the general welfare of society. When you start getting into hard drugs like meth and some of these others, well, I think that's probably something we ought to consider, because we know that it doesn't just impact the individual. It starts to pour over into theft and violence and some of these other things that create real problems for society. But I don't know if that's true of CBD and THC. I think with a CBD, I think, and I don't know, again, I'm not the expert on this stuff, but it seems to me that from my perspective that most CBDs are legalized already because they're using it in oils and creams and shampoo and beard oil and everything else, which I don't know if there's any real benefit to that. But yeah, I think it's a recreational drug. I think a lot of people use it. I've had people very close to me who have used marijuana for medicinal purposes, and it's actually worked. So now, as far as nationally and locally, how do I view this? I think states ought to be able to make those decisions on their own. That's it. Simple. As I believe with most things, the state ought to make the decision. It's that easy. All right, Daniel Kraus. Will you ever do an event in Australia in the future? I anticipate and imagine that we will. Anecdotally, I've seen a lot of orders from our store come from Australia. And a lot of our members in the Iron Council and in our Facebook group are from Australia, and our download are from Australia as well. So the overwhelming bulk of the downloads and traffic that we receive is from the US. That makes sense. Then you get into Canada and the UK. It's about split evenly between the two. So Canada and the UK. And then the third most listened to or engaged demographic is Australia. So I imagine that in the future, we probably will do an event when restrictions ease and travel isn't as difficult as it is now. Yeah. Now, I will say this. Here's one thing that's always fascinating to me is people will say things like, if you did an event in Australia, or if you did an event in Florida, or if you did an event in California, then I would definitely go. Because look, we have an event coming up. It's called the Main Event. If you're interested, check it out, orderaman.com/main event. And not surprisingly, it's in Maine. That's why we called it Main Event. We're not very creative around here. So, and I've had guys reach out. Oh, well, I really want to come to the event, but, if it was in Montana in my backyard, then I would go. And I've actually found the opposite to be true. Like, if you're not willing to come to Maine, and I realize Australia's a little far. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of pass on that one because it's literally across the planet. I get it. But if you live in Minnesota and you're like, well, in Maine, I don't know. I don't know if I can get to Maine. But if you had it in Minnesota, I would do it here. Odds are you wouldn't even do it if it was in your own backyard. Oh, I know you guys are doing your event in my backyard, but I've got to go to the dentist today and my kids and this and that and fill in the blank. You guys, invest in yourself, all right? Don't pull this BS of saying, hey, just because it doesn't happen to be in your own backyard, literally, that you can't make it, because history has shown that you wouldn't make it anyways. So I've never acquiesced to these individuals who say, if you had it here, I would do it. History suggests otherwise. We'll say it that way. So if you like what we have to say, if you're interested in what we're doing, come to an event, all right? And Daniel, I know you're in Australia. I know it's difficult, but surely you have a desire to come to the U.S. for some reason. So maybe it's next year. Maybe it's in 2 years. And you start stashing money aside right now, and you coordinate one of our events with your U.S. tour, and you make it happen until we get to Australia. But I do imagine that we will at some point. Okay? All right. How are we doing on time here? About 30 minutes in. Cool. Alistair Vec. What are the best ways to avoid injuries and get back to motivate to get back to the routine after a break? It's kind of phrased interestingly. Also, the best ways to get good sleep. Look, guys, I'm not the expert on this. There's plenty of other individuals who can tell you how to avoid injuries. My fitness coach is Josiah Novak. Certainly a big help for me. You can look him up on Instagram or Facebook. Good sleep. I mean, there's Sean Stevenson, I believe, wrote a great book on sleep habits. Ted Rice, we've done a podcast with him, talks about getting good sleep. There's plenty of information out there on getting proper sleep and avoiding injuries. The only thing I would be able to add and suggest is that you make sure you stretch and you warm up, you eat right, you get the sleep that you need, you don't overdo your training, which I think some of us could fall into. Not all of us, because I think it's more likely that we undertrain, but some men probably could overtrain, and you just be smart. People have asked me with my training, do I have any injuries? And I don't. My body has fortunately always been very resilient, and I'm not sure that's because of anything I've done or just because physically that's the way that I'm made. My body's always been pretty resilient. I never suffered any real injuries in sports when I was playing as a high school student and athlete. Even now at 39 years old, I had to think about that one for a minute. With the training that I have, I've never experienced any real injuries. I've got some minor shoulder pain periodically, got a little bit of hyperextension maybe in my elbow occasionally just from some training. But all of those things are worked through, and my body's always been pretty resilient, fortunately. So I don't have much to share there. Wish I could help more, but there's plenty of other information that's way, way better suited than I am. You might hear the shuffling of the papers here, so there it is. Mike Snyder, do you have any suggestions or resources on how to make a tax strategy for personal or business finances? Well, I don't have any suggestions other than find a qualified CPA. That's it. Just find a very qualified CPA, because I'm not going to give you any tax advice here. I just don't know enough about your personal situation. I don't know what you're trying to do. I don't know what businesses you have or income. I don't know any of that stuff. So for me to say do X, Y, and Z would be ignorant at best and potentially destructive for you and your financial strategy. So find a great CPA. How do you find that? Ask the most successful people you know, financially successful people you know, who they use. That goes back to the question earlier. How do you build success? You find people who are successful and you do what they do. So go through your I was going to say Rolodex. Go through your phone. Because believe it or not, and I think a lot of you guys actually had Rolodexes when you were younger, because we didn't have these. This thing didn't come out until I was like a senior in high school, maybe even after that. Anyways, get out your contacts wherever they are and look for the most successful person you know. Call them up. Hey, I need a tax strategy for my income and my business finances. Who do you use? And they'll help you. That's what I would do. Zach Williams. Trust building with children. Exercise habits, ways to overcome when their fears become a reality. For example, I spent 2 days encouraging my 4-year-old daughter to not be afraid of fish and to swim while at the beach. She can finally get in. Within the hour, she was stung by a jellyfish. She trusted my words, and like does, it wasn't perfect. How can I explain to her that we can't live in fear but trust those around us and ourselves to experience, live, and thrive? Well, I think one mistake that we make as parents is we try to make our children believe that things will always be perfect, right? Like nothing bad will ever happen and everything will be fine. One of my sons, for example, he gets afraid at night because he thinks there's going to be a break-in or an intruder. And for me to say, hey, don't worry about that, actually that would be a lie. That wouldn't be an accurate statement. That wouldn't actually help him in his life, because you actually should, to some degree, be concerned with that. Not that it should consume your life, of course. It can be taken to the extreme, but you ought to be concerned with that. So I think one of the things that we really need to make sure that we do is explain the reality of the situation, because if we don't, then we set ourselves up for failure and them for failure. Oh, nothing will happen, everything will be fine, you won't have to worry about it, and then your daughter gets stung by a jellyfish. So looking back, what could you have done differently? Well, odds are you probably knew there was jellyfish in the bay or wherever it is you were swimming, the ocean there. And so maybe you should have had that conversation, right? Instead of just teeing her up that way. But I think that we overcome our fears through familiarization, right? So fish, for example, she's afraid of fish. Well, when's the last time you went to an aquarium and she actually saw the fish? Or do you have an aquarium at home? Could you even get her a goldfish at home and help her get familiar with a goldfish and gradually introduce from there? Yeah, you could do that. And maybe you did do that. But I think that we get over fears by gradual introduction and familiarization with what we're afraid of. Because typically we're afraid of the things that we don't understand. So if we learn to understand these things better, then we're not quite as afraid of these things. And then you help her manage risk. You talk to her. I don't know how... She's 4. Okay, so she's young. Once she's a little older, I would say you talk with her about managing risk. My sons help me with our store, for example, and we talk about spending tens of thousands of dollars on product. And I say, hey, look, here's a check I wrote. Here's how much all of this stuff's going to cost me. And one of my sons one day said, oh my goodness, that's a lot. And I said, it is a lot of money. That's true. It is a lot of money. But if I buy it for $10,000 and I can sell our inventory for $20,000, how much do I make? He's like, well, you make $10,000. And I said, well, what's the worst case scenario? Let's play this out. What's the worst case scenario? And he said, well, you don't sell anything. I said, exactly. So what does that mean? It means that you spent all that money and now you can't sell any of it. I said, great. So I'm out $10,000. That's what you're saying. Yes. That's the worst case scenario. And then I need to explain. Now, for some of you, you might think, well, that's catastrophic. Others might think that's a drop in the bucket. It's not a drop in the bucket for me, but it's also not catastrophic. It's somewhere in between. That's a risk I'm willing to take. It's calculated, based on what we've done in the past. I don't think it's something I need to be overly concerned with, something aware of. And then we just manage the risk. So I think people like to say things like, fear is false evidence appearing real. That's bullshit. Fear is a real thing. And it's ingrained and indoctrinated, maybe indoctrinated to a degree, but it's also biologically hardwired into us. Why? To keep you alive. Like, I don't like heights. I'm not a big fan of heights, flying especially. Okay, so if I come to the edge of a cliff, my fear reaction turns on and says, hey, this is dangerous. Step away from the cliff. Well, that's a good thing. That's keeping me alive. That's telling me don't get too close because you could potentially fall off and die. So are you telling me that's false evidence appearing real? No, that's a very real thing. I used to hike Angel's Landing in southern Utah. Some of you guys are familiar with it because you've been to Zion National Park. That was in our backyard. It was about 20 minutes from where we lived when we were in Utah. And every year, somebody fell off Angel's Landing and died. Every year, without fail. It always happened. That individual probably should have listened to their fear receptors or whatever it is that's telling you don't get close to the edge. Okay, so it's not false evidence. Now, some of us might blow it out of proportion, and that's where that familiarity comes into play. But I think you probably ought to be aware of the fear and then manage the risk effectively. And this is what we do to our kids. We tell them to put the blindfold on, to not worry about these situations, and then they get stung by the proverbial jellyfish, and it's like, oh yeah, well that could happen sometimes. That would have been information that would have been helpful, before I went into the water. And so what do? We lie to our kids so we get them to do things that they wouldn't normally do. Manage the risk, teach her to manage the risk, and help her see that, sometimes having a good time means you're going to need to get stung once in a while. And explain that. I hope that helps. Jeremy Piper, why we need to learn from history, not erase it. I don't know if this is rhetorical, but, the quote is, a wise man learns... What is it? A smart man learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others. That's what you're talking about here. I don't need to go through the lesson myself the hard way if I can learn the lesson from somebody else. Now, if I'm not willing to learn it from somebody else, then I'll need to go through it the hard way. This is the whole argument with communism. And they dub it socialism, but we know where it leads, all right? The problem with it is that it's never worked in the history of man. And it's always led to disastrous results for everybody involved. And if we erase history because we're not comfortable with it, this goes back to the previous question. Oh, I might get stung by a jellyfish? That doesn't sound good. Well, let's just pretend the jellyfish doesn't exist. Well, that's stupid. The jellyfish does exist, and it will sting you, and it will hurt. It may not happen every time, but it's a possibility, and we need to be aware of it. So when Jeremy says why we need to learn from history and not erase it, because erasing it doesn't make the lesson go away. It's like the ostrich that buries their head in the sand, or the kid that's playing peekaboo with their daddy and puts their hands over their eyes and thinks that, oh, because I can't see dad, he must not be able to see me. Well, that's a very immature way of thinking, and it's cute when your little girl is playing peekaboo with you, but it's stupid when you have 20, 30, 40-year-old grown adults who are doing the same thing. Oh, it's uncomfortable. We had a bad history, and there was racism, and there was people who died, and I don't want to hear about it. And it's like uncomfortable, so let's ignore it. Well, ignoring it actually will recreate the situation. I mean, racism is a great example. To pretend, to try to erase all of the history. And by the way, I'm not saying that we should have shrines to racist individuals. That's not what I'm saying. But you take somebody like George Washington, for example, somebody who had slaves, he owned slaves, that's irrefutable, he owned slaves, but that's not what we're celebrating when we have a statue of George Washington. We're not saying, oh, this guy is a great hero because he happened to have slaves. No, we're celebrating him because of his positive accomplishments and the foundation of this great country that we live in. We know he has flaws. He didn't always live up to the ideals that he espoused, or at least he talked about. But he got us on the right path. And then it's our job to learn from the past and then make it better. not to erase it completely, because if we do that, then the generations that come behind us won't know about what actually happened and what real lessons need to be learned. And it would be very easy to slip into destructive and dangerous habits, activities, involvement that have created disastrous results for millions of people across the planet throughout history. So let's not erase it. Let's look at it accurately. All right, we can look at George Washington, for example, and think very highly of who he was as a war general, think highly of who he was as the first president of the United States of America, think very highly of some of his characteristics that he espoused and that he lived by in order to make him the man that he was, and at the same time condemn some of the negative behavior or practices. I don't think this is it seems to me that it's not a very difficult thing, but man, I know a lot of people struggle with it. All right, let's go to Travis Smith. When looking for a battle team, what questions should a new member of the Iron Council be asking leaders of the battle teams? So Travis is specifically referring to our Iron Council, which is our exclusive brotherhood. We've got about 640 men in the Iron Council now. And when you join the Iron Council, you will be banded with and have the opportunity to join a battle team. This is a team of 14 to 15 other individuals who are going to hold you accountable, help you flesh out some of your ideas when it comes to your battle plan, and then keep you on track to accomplish what you say you want to set out to accomplish. So Travis is asking, what should a new member be asking? Well, first and foremost, you want to look at their meeting time. That's very important. Is it going to work with you? If it's not, find a new battle team. Next, look at the members of the battle team. Are these guys you jive with? Are these guys you resonate with? Are they trying to achieve similar things to you? Ask them what their goals are, what their ambitions are, what kind of successes they've had in the past, what's kept them back, what failures have they experienced. I would want to know that because I'm trying to walk a similar path. So try to find these individuals. I would also ask about accountability. In what ways do you hold team members accountable to their actions, to their desires, to their battle plans? Because if I'm joining the Iron Council for accountability, and the overwhelming majority of men do join for that reason, then I need to know specifically and what you do exactly in order to hold me accountable to the things that I want to accomplish. Those are some of the questions I would ask battle team leaders, and you should visit multiple teams, see how they answer. They're going to be asking you some questions, at least they should, because this is not a one-way interview. This is a two-way interview. You're interviewing them and the team, and they're interviewing you to see if you're a good fit. And these are some of the questions they should be asking you as well. Dave Boris, there's a hyphen or an accent there, and I don't know how to pronounce that, but Dave Boris says, do you have tips on how to avoid our default, also known as falling into the mindless automatic actions of the natural man, or exercises one can do to strengthen discipline? I feel myself slipping into that state way too often. I mean, I wouldn't be making this question if I wasn't on Facebook right now. All the best. Keep up the great work you do. Love it. Yeah, the best way to do this to avoid slipping into your default is having a strategy that keeps you from slipping into your default. This is the battle plan that I use personally. Maybe you have another system that you use. But I'll tell you, it's very difficult for me to slip into default because I have this plan. It's articulated. It's drafted every 90 days. I've got it documented. I have to track it every single day. And so it's very easy for me just to coast into wherever life is going to take me because my intentionality into making sure that doesn't happen is so good. It's so effective. It's in a procedure. It's codified. And this keeps me from falling into that default mode that the natural man has a tendency of doing every time. But the only reason you fall into that default mode is because it's the default. There's no other plan in place. So you have to have another plan in place to ensure that you don't slip back to the path of least resistance. That's the natural man. So use the battle planner or use another program, use another system, read a bunch of books, listen to a bunch of podcasts on how to plan out your day, how to plan out your year or your week, and the battle planner is a great resource for that as well. And by the way, being on Facebook isn't a bad thing. Kind of making it sound like it's a bad thing. I mean, I wouldn't ask this question if I wasn't on Facebook right now. I think it's acceptable, guys, to be on Facebook to varying degrees, just based on your preference and what it is you do. for work. I'm on Facebook and Insta and all these other social media accounts quite often because it's my work. So it's not that it's unacceptable, it's that it fits into the plan that I have. And that's the most important thing. Does it fit into the greater system that you have? Matt Lewis, what is best in life? I can't answer that for you. For me, it's my family. That's what's best in life. I would say the best thing, and this is how I can answer this question most broadly for the most amount of men, is that the thing that's best in life is autonomy. When people ask me what is success, the answer is it's autonomy. Because I don't know if it's money, I don't know if it's love, I don't know if it's romance or finances or fitness, or I don't know what it is for you. I can't determine that for you. But what I can say is autonomy, and that applies generally and broadly to every single person. It's the ability to do what you want, when you want, how you want, why you want at any given time. And that level of autonomy is true success and truly what's best in life for you. If I want to go spend time with my children at the lake, then the autonomy is what's going to allow me to go do that. Now, there's a lot of things that come into play. Financial wellness is important. My ability to market myself effectively so that I can have this. My ability to manage my time effectively so that I can get done what I need to get done so that when I have free time, I can be fully engaged and present in whatever that free time is. So, yes, best in life, autonomy, control over your own life, not somebody else dictating for you. Mark Birchall, to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. Cool. Not much of a question, but there you go. Mike Morenz, how do we lead our young men to respect authority, follow laws, and stand for freedom when it feels like our freedoms are being limited and being taken away by laws and authorities nowadays? Well, protesting is a huge way to do that. That's like ingrained and indoctrinated into who we are as Americans, peaceful protesting. It's always fascinating when people are fully on board with quote-unquote peaceful protesting, and yet when a business owner, like we had earlier in the week, Ian Smith, stands up for what he believes, you have some of those individuals who think, well, he's breaking the law. Well, maybe he's actually peacefully protesting. Well, he shouldn't be breaking the law. That's actually kind of the point. Because if it was convenient or easy or didn't ruffle any feathers, do you think anybody would listen or pay attention? Of course not. Colin Kaepernick, same way. And I've said it 1,000 times. People will say, well, it's not about the national anthem. No, it is about the national anthem. Because if it wasn't about the national anthem, he wouldn't have protested by taking a knee during the national anthem. He would have chosen some other time to do it. So there might be some other reasons, but he chose the national anthem. Why? Because it would get attention. Because it's not comfortable. It's not popular. It is now, but it's not popular like it once, like it is now, I should say. So Colin Kaepernick deliberately and intentionally chose to do something that wasn't popular so that he could get attention, which would draw attention to his cause, whatever that cause at the time was, which was police brutality. Okay, but he used the national anthem as a tool, as a leveraging point to bring attention. So it was about the national anthem. Let's wrap our heads around that. Okay, so peaceful protesting is great. Now, I don't have to agree with Colin Kaepernick. I don't have to agree with my guest, Ian Smith, for opening his business. In this case, I happen to agree with him. I don't have to agree with any of that. But we are a nation founded on protesting. I mean, we were literally founded on standing up against tyrannical dictatorship. Taxation without representation. That's what we were founded on. It's in the Declaration of Independence. It's in the Constitution. So yes, you might have to break a few laws. Well, you should always be law-abiding citizens. Actually, our Constitution suggests otherwise in certain circumstances. In certain circumstances. That we are to exercise our God-given rights to defend ourselves, our lives, our liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what this nation was founded on. So what can you do to lead your young men to respect authority? Read them the Constitution. Read them the Declaration of Independence. Teach them United States history. Teach them world history. Explain to them when it is appropriate. Explain to them when it is not. Explain to them how to, I was going to say take matters into your own hands, but I don't want that to be interpreted the wrong way. Explain to them ways to exercise your rights in appropriate ways. And sometimes it might be to defy orders or even laws. And other times it's, I'm going to abide by this and I'm not going to abide by this. I'm not saying this is the wild, wild west, but you need to teach your sons and your daughters when it's appropriate and when it's not. Because if all you do is toe the line, regardless of what's being said, I just saw a quote. A lot of you guys are familiar with this. A lot of the Nazis during World War II, once that whole thing ended, and they were being prosecuted, will say things like, well, I was just following orders. Now, we say that would never be us. I was having a conversation with my brother-in-law the other day. That would never be us, people say. Really? I don't believe that. I believe that if you were born and raised in Nazi Germany, that would be very easy for you to say, well, I was just following orders. I didn't think I was being bad. I was just doing what I was supposed to be doing. Following orders, following laws, following rules that somebody else dictated. Well, look, if that person is evil at their core, and I don't think anybody would argue with me that Hitler was an evil, evil human being, you're telling me that you have to follow that law and that order and that rule? Come on now. Come on now. Like, surely you don't believe that. Now, whether you want to debate as to whether a law is justified or not, that's a different conversation. But if you believe a law is evil, is destructive, is tyrannical in nature, you're telling me that I'm supposed to blindly follow that law? No, that's what the Nazis said. Well, I just killed those individuals. I was just following orders. I don't know what I was just following orders. I don't want to be that person. You don't want to be that person. I want to stand for what's right and what's true. And I want to obey the laws of the land as long as they're right and they're true. But if they're not right and they're not true, and they're destructive to myself, my family, and my constitutional rights, then I believe we have a moral obligation to stand against those laws. Now, there's different avenues. Elected officials, public and peaceful protesting. There's ways to go about doing this in a lawful and peaceful manner, and we should exercise those routes initially and first. But I think you teach them history, Mike. What's come of those who blindly followed orders? Nazi Germany is a great example. I was just following orders. Well, I'm not interested in being that guy. So you teach them about these things. So go to a previous question. Learn from history. Don't erase it. I hope that helps, Mike. The best lesson is history. It's all there. What's worked and what hasn't. You just got to learn it. All right, let's take a couple more here. Alex Dennison. When considering a career change and going over the pros and cons list, what are the most important questions to be asked? I've talked about this in the past. I'm not like a pros and cons list kind of guy. So Kip is more that, I would say. I think you'd get a better answer from Kip. I wish he was here to answer this for you today. Because I don't tend to look at like, what are the pros? What are the cons? Let's do a T-chart and document it all. I tend to be more intuitive. Like, this feels right. Okay, sounds good. Go and do that. So I guess the questions I would ask is how will this impact my family? How will this impact my finances? And I use all of that to support my intuitive decision. Like, if I feel like starting an Order of Man podcast is a good thing, I didn't do a pros and cons list. I just said, okay, well, it feels right, so I'm going to do it. But in order to make it work, I'm going to have some money set aside. I know it's going to cut into my work time. And so here's, 5 steps I need to do to ensure that I can make sure this works. So I use the questions I was asking as ways to support and validate my idea that I felt good about. So I don't actually use personally a very rational pros and cons list to say, should I do this? Should I not? I'm like, nah, it feels pretty good. What do I need to, now that I've made my decision and I know that feels pretty good, what do I need to do in order to minimize my risk? That's more of the approach I take. I hope that helps. Santiago Andres says, what general life lessons would you pass on to your son and daughter also dating? These questions are hard for me, man. They really are. Recently, my younger bro and sister told me that her parents don't talk to them much in regards to this matter, so I want to take on the challenge. Look, I've said this before, guys. Like, if you want better answers, you got to ask great questions. You got to improve the quality of your questions. And just saying, hey, generally, what would you say? It could be 1,000, 1,000,000, an infinite number of things. What specifically do you want to know about? Do you want to know about discipline? Do you want to know about encouraging risk-taking like a gentleman asked earlier? Do you want to know about dating, you said here? Do you want to know about education? Like what? I don't know. I don't know what you want to talk about. Generally, I would say that I would teach my kids to be self-sufficient and self-reliant and take some accountability for their own life. I would teach them individual responsibility. Generally, that's what I would say. And then that can translate into a lot of different topics. But if you want something more specific, and then ask me more specific, and I can get to it. All right, let's take this as the last one. Nathan Mason. The Bible has a lot to say about being a good man, but what does it have to say about being good at being a man? I don't know. Read it. I mean, read it. You guys can interpret it. Look, I'm not the best when it comes to the Bible. Like I've read the Bible. I'm not a scholar. I don't have scripture memorized. I said this before. I would just read it. That's what I would do. All I know is that we've been instructed and taught that faith without works is dead. And so being good at being a man is more than philosophical. Faith, for example, it's action. It's putting things into practice. It's doing. It's working. And so I'm not going to rely on faith. Oh, this goes back to somebody who was talking about a global pandemic. Oh, God will save me. Well, will he? I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think he would, but maybe he's already saved me by giving me everything I need to save myself. All the mindset, the skill set, the provisions, the financial resources and acumen to be able to build up my own safety net. That doesn't mean I don't recognize his hand in what we do. It just means that I am grateful eternally and every day for the blessings I've already had. Now it's my job to put them into practice. And I think that's the distinction between being a good man, morality, and being good at being a man, capability. I work on both. Because look, if you have a capable man who's not moral, well, Hitler's a great example of that. Obviously a great communicator. Obviously could inspire. I'm not saying that in a positive way, by the way, but could inspire millions and millions of people to do horrific things to each other. So there's some capability there. He probably had some military acumen, obviously. Was he moral? Of course not. Nobody would argue that he's moral. So capability or being good at being a man is not enough. Now, if you have a moral individual, and I'm kind of wrestling with this in my mind, can you be moral and not be capable? I don't know. I don't know that you can. I've been thinking a lot about this. I used to say, well, morality and capability were separate. They were distinct, but I'm not sure that's the case. I think morality has a component of capability. So, for example, let's take this example. Can you be committed to your wife if you're not tempted to be unfaithful? I don't know. I don't know if that's actually commitment. Commitment to me would say, okay, I'm tempted every day, and yet I choose not to act on those temptations. So that's how I look. Again, maybe you can hear me thinking about this as you're listening to me right now. It's like, can you be moral and not capable? I don't know. I don't think you can. So peaceful. We fall into this with nice guy syndrome, right? Can you be peaceful if you're not capable of administering violence? I don't know that you can. You might just be a wimp. Somebody who's peaceful is probably very capable of administering violence effectively, and yet chooses not to, in all situations, exhibit or display his ability to be violent and to do violence to other individuals. These are things I wrestle with and think about, obviously, and obviously I haven't thought completely through the answer, but I do believe still that being a good man represents morality, decency, kindness, compassion, empathy, the virtues we typically think of that way. And they might even be more feminine in nature. And I don't say that negatively. I just mean empathy, kindness, compassion, nurturing. We all have the ability to exhibit those characteristics, but generally we consider them more feminine in nature. And then being good at being a man is something that we would consider more masculine in nature. Right? Protect, provide, preside, strength, mastery, as Jack Donovan would say, the tactical virtues, which I believe, if I remember correctly, are strength, honor, mastery, and the last one escapes me. You guys can correct me on that. But those are the virtues that we consider generally masculine. And I think that lends more towards being good at being a man, which actually Jack Donovan talks quite a bit about. And a book, I think it's that one right there. I think it's that one. Or it might be that one. Called Manhood in the Making by David Gilmour. Talks about this concept at length as well. Check it out. Manhood in the Making by David Gilmour, or any of Jack Donovan's works, because he talks about it as well. All right, guys. Man, a lot of questions, a lot of good ones today. I hope I gave you some good answers, some solid answers, at least some things to contemplate and think on. Keep the good questions coming. I've got 4 other pages actually, of questions that I failed to get to, but we will continue to work through those things and continue to give the best answers that we can. In the meantime, guys, make sure you check out the Battle Ready course, 30 Days to Battle Ready, at orderofman.com/battle ready. And then also, if you would, please just leave a rating and review. Very simple. It'll take you 2 seconds. All you have to do, specifically if you're on Apple Podcasts, is you click, I'll show you if you're on YouTube. You click right here on the podcast player. You click this little button on the bottom that says search. You type in Order of Man. Click on the one that comes up. My internet's not loading. Click on the Order of Man podcast. And there you can see right there, you can leave a rating and review. You just scroll down a little bit, leave 5 stars, leave your review. What did that take me? 30 seconds? Take 30 seconds, leave a rating and review. Goes a long way in promoting what we're doing here. As of right now, I'll tell you exactly how many reviews we have. We have 4,800. So let's get above the 5,000 ratings. That's 200 more, a little less than 200. I think we can do that by next week. So the goal is 5,000. All right. Leave a rating and review. That goes a long way. Check out the Battle Ready program, orderofman.com/battle ready. I'll be back later this week to talk about, I had made a note. What was I going to talk with you guys about? Oh, you know what I was going to talk with you about on Friday? I've got a note in here somewhere. I'll pull it up here in a minute. But I was going to talk with you about post-COVID discipline. A lot of you guys are asking me about that. How do you maintain consistency? How do you maintain discipline? Your world's been rocked. Everything's been flipped around. So how do you maintain and or develop discipline in the post-COVID environment in which we live, or current COVID environment, however you want to look at it? Anyways, guys, I'll be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.